I am Jessica, 68 years old, and the widow of Arthur, who built our fortune in real estate. We spent 40 wonderful years together, in our Malibu mansion worth $10 million. When my son Travis brought home Heather, something felt off about her excessive interest in our property. Still, I wanted to believe in their love. Then just days after their wedding they arrived with a notary demanding I vacate my home immediately. What Heather did not realize was that I had anticipated her scheme all along. Before I share what happened next, let me know where you are watching from, and hit that subscribe button if you enjoy stories about family betrayal and sweet justice. I grew up in Cedar Springs, Michigan, a small town where everyone knew your business before you did. My parents owned the local hardware store, and we lived modestly but comfortably above it. I learned the value of hard work and honesty, early helping out at the register after school and on weekends. Those simple beginnings shaped my character in ways I would only appreciate decades later. I met Arthur during my sophomore year at Michigan State. He was studying business and had big dreams of building a real estate empire. While other girls wanted romance and flowers, Arthur captivated me with blueprints and property value projections. His vision and determination were irresistible. We married when I was 22, right after graduation against my parents, warning that we were too young. The early years were tough. We lived in a tiny apartment in Los Angeles, while Arthur worked as a property manager learning the business from the ground up. I took a job as a school administrator to support us. Every penny we saved went toward purchasing our first investment property, a rundown duplex in a transitioning neighborhood. I spent weekends painting walls and fixing cabinets alongside Arthur. That duplex became 2, then 5, then an entire portfolio of properties across Southern California. When I became pregnant with Travis at 28, we had just begun to taste success. Arthur had established his own development company, and we had moved into our first real home, a modest 4-bedroom in Santa Monica. Travis was our only child, partly by choice, and partly because complications during his birth made having more children impossible. Perhaps that is why we both doted on him so much. Travis was a sweet child but easily influenced. In elementary school, he would come home with mannerisms and phrases copied from whoever the popular kid was that week. In high school, he joined the football team, not because he loved the sport, but because his friends did. Arthur worried about this tendency, often saying, "A man needs to know his own mind, Jess." Travis seems to let others think for him. Still, we were proud of him. He graduated from UCLA with a business degree and joined Arthur's company. Though he lacked his father's intuition for property values and market trends, he was good with people and handled client relations well. Arthur planned to gradually hand the company over to Travis, mentoring him along the way. Then came the diagnosis: pancreatic cancer stage 4. Arthur fought bravely for 18 months before passing away 5 years ago. He was 67, the same age I was when this story with Heather unfolded. The irony is not lost on me. Arthur's death hit Travis particularly hard. At 32, he had always leaned on his father for guidance both personally and professionally. Without that anchor, he seemed adrift. He began missing meetings, showing up unprepared for important client presentations. Eventually, he stepped back from day-to-day operations, allowing our longtime CFO to take the reins while remaining a figurehead. I tried to maintain our relationship, inviting him for weekly dinners, calling regularly to check in. Sometimes he engaged, other times he was distant or did not show up at all. I gave him space to grieve, while trying to keep him connected to family. During this difficult period, my best friend Eleanor became my rock. We had met 20 years earlier through a charity committee, and had grown closer over time. After Arthur died, she would come over with takeout and wine, listening to me reminisce, or sitting in companionable silence when words failed me. Eleanor, a retired divorce attorney, had seen enough family drama to fill a library, and her wisdom proved invaluable when Travis started dating again. Travis had never had the best judgment with women. In college, there was Alicia, who borrowed his credit card for textbooks and somehow charged a spring break trip to Cancun. After graduation, Natalie convinced him to invest in her brother's tech startup that mysteriously folded after receiving funding. Each time I tried to gently point out the red flags, while supporting his right to make his own choices, even when those choices led to pain. When Arthur was dying, he made me promise to look after Travis and protect our legacy. He has a good heart, Jess, Arthur had said, but not everyone does. Make sure what we built helps him rather than making him a target. With that in mind, Arthur and I had worked with our estate attorney to create trusts and legal protections. I became sole owner of our Malibu mansion, a stunning 6-bedroom Mediterranean overlooking the Pacific that Arthur had designed himself as our dream retirement home. The house meant everything to me. Arthur and I had spent countless evenings on the terrace watching sunsets while planning our future. Every corner held memories of him, from the kitchen, where he attempted to make his mother's famous lasagna, to the office, where he sketched new development ideas on napkins. I could not imagine leaving, nor could I imagine anyone else living there. It was my sanctuary, my connection to the life we had built together through decades of partnership. Little did I know that this home, our sanctuary, would become the center of a betrayal I never saw coming from the one person I thought I could always trust, my own son. Travis called me on a Tuesday evening, his voice uncharacteristically animated. "Mom, I want you to meet someone special. Can we come for dinner Friday?" It had been 6 months since he had brought anyone to the house, so naturally I was intrigued and hopeful. Perhaps this new relationship was helping him move forward after his father's death. When Friday arrived, I prepared Arthur's famous prime rib, Travis' favorite meal. At precisely 7, the doorbell rang. Travis stood there, beaming his arm around a stunning brunette. "Mom, this is Heather Lewis," he announced proudly. "Heather, my mother Jessica." Heather was 32, the same age as Travis, though something in her eyes suggested someone far more experienced in life's complications. She was undeniably beautiful, with glossy, dark hair, bright green eyes, and a figure that her expensive designer dress highlighted perfectly. Her handshake was firm, her smile dazzling. "Your home is absolutely magnificent, Jessica," she gushed, looking past me into the foyer with its sweeping staircase and crystal chandelier. "Travis mentioned it was nice, but this is like something from Architectural Digest." Throughout dinner, Heather complimented everything from the Waterford crystal glasses to the original artwork on the walls. "Is that a genuine Richter?" she asked, pointing to a painting Arthur had purchased at auction for our 25th anniversary. Her knowledge of art seemed oddly specific for someone who Travis said worked in real estate consulting. "May I use your restroom?" Heather asked midway through dessert. When she had not returned after 15 minutes, I went looking for her, only to find her in Arthur's office, taking photos of the room with her phone. "Oh," she startled, nearly dropping her phone. "I got lost. This house is so big, I was just admiring your husband's taste." Travis mentioned he was quite the real estate mogul. I smiled politely but felt a strange unease. "Yes, the guest bathroom is just down the hall to the left." After dinner, as Travis and Heather prepared to leave, she asked surprisingly detailed questions about the property's square footage when it was built and recent renovations. "Professional curiosity," she explained with a laugh. "On say a real estate person. Always a real estate person." As the weeks passed, Travis brought Heather around more frequently. Each time I noticed her cataloging the house, with her eyes occasionally disappearing during gatherings, only to be found examining some far corner of the property. Once I discovered her in my bedroom, claiming to be looking for a place to take a phone call. "How did you and Heather meet?" I asked Travis during one of our rare moments alone. He explained they had connected at a charity golf tournament his company had sponsored. Heather worked as an independent real estate consultant for high-net-worth clients looking to invest in luxury properties. "She understands the business," Mom, Travis said enthusiastically. "Not like other women I've dated. She gets what Dad built, and what it means to me." But did she? Something about Heather felt calculated. When she thought no one was watching, her bright smile would drop, replaced by a focused, almost predatory expression. And she seemed determined to create distance between Travis and me. "Jessica still treats you like a child," I overheard her telling Travis one evening as they sat on the terrace. "You run a multi-million-dollar company, yet she acts like you need her approval for everything." "She's just protective," Travis defended weakly. Or, controlling, Heather countered. "You said yourself. She still has final say on major company decisions, even though you're CEO. Does that seem right to you?" I had retreated, quietly disturbed by the direction she was pushing him. Yes, I maintained oversight of the company as majority shareholder, but only because Arthur had structured it that way to mentor Travis gradually. It was protection, not control. 3 months into their relationship, I was in the kitchen when Heather stepped onto the patio to take a phone call. Through the partially open door, I heard snippets that made my blood run cold. After the wedding, it won't matter. Yes, the property alone is worth at least $10 million. No, she has no idea. Trust me, by next year it will all be ours. When she returned inside, I pretended to be busy with dinner preparations, my mind racing. That evening, I called Eleanor. I think Travis's new girlfriend is after the estate. I confided, recounting what I had overheard. Eleanor was silent for a moment. Have you spoken to Travis about your concerns? How can I? He seems happier than has been since Arthur died. If I'm wrong, it'll just push him away. And if you're right, you could lose everything Arthur worked for. Eleanor pointed out pragmatically. Jess, you need to trust your instincts here. Arthur would want you to protect yourself and Travis. The next day, I tried to broach the subject gently, with Travis over lunch. Heather seems very interested in real estate. She asks a lot of questions about the house. Travis laughed. She's trying to impress you, Mom. She knows how important Dad's legacy is to me. It just seems like she moves very quickly. You've only known each other a few months. His expression hardened. I'm 37, not 17. I think I can recognize when something is real. He pushed his chair back. I thought you'd be happy for me. Heather said you'd probably try to interfere, but I defended you. Travis, I just want what's best for you. Then support my choices for once instead of questioning them. He stood up. Heather is the best thing that's happened to me since Dad died. Either accept that or... He did not finish the sentence, but the ultimatum hung in the air. That conversation convinced me that direct confrontation would only drive Travis further into Heather's orbit. Instead, I would need to be more strategic and gather evidence. If my suspicions were unfounded, no harm done. But if they were correct, I needed to be prepared to protect both myself and ultimately my son from a predator who had set her sights on our family fortune. What I did not realize was how little time I had left before Heather's true intentions would be revealed in a way that would shake our family to its core. Just 5 months into their relationship, Travis called with news that made my heart sink. Mom, Heather and I are engaged, he announced, his voice bubbling with excitement. I had not heard since he was a child opening Christmas presents. We do not want a long engagement. We're thinking next month at the Bel Air Hotel. Next month, I struggled to keep alarm from my voice. Honey, that seems very rushed. Most venues are booked a year in advance. Heather knows, the event coordinator Travis explained dismissively. And we do not want to wait. When you know, right? That evening, I sat alone in Arthur's study, his photograph on the desk, seeming to watch me with concern. What would you do, Arthur? I whispered to his image. The answer came to me immediately, almost as if he had spoken. Protect our son, even if it means protecting him from himself. The next morning, I called Sandra Parker, a private investigator Eleanor had recommended from her days practicing law. I need a thorough background check on a Heather Lewis, I explained. Specifically, her romantic history, financial situation, and any legal issues. Is this a prenuptial matter? Sandra asked professionally. You could say that, I replied. My son is rushing into marriage with someone I barely know. While Sandra began her investigation, Heather launched into wedding planning with alarming efficiency. Rather than the intimate family gathering, Travis had always said he wanted Heather pushed for an extravagant affair with 200 guests, many of whom were business contacts. Neither Travis nor I knew personally. The flowers alone are $15,000, I remarked, during a planning meeting at my house. Only the best for Travis. Heather smiled sweetly, then added, I assume you're covering the wedding costs. Travis mentioned that's tradition, and he said money is no object for you. Before I could respond, she continued, Oh, and we'll need to host the rehearsal dinner here. The terrace is perfect, and it will save us renting another venue. Throughout the planning, Heather systematically excluded me from decisions, while insisting I fund every extravagance. Whenever I suggested scaling back, Travis would look hurt. Dad would have wanted it to be special, Mom. Why are you being so tight with money he wanted us to enjoy? Those words stung because they contained a grain of truth. Arthur had been generous, believing wealth should bring joy. But he had also been prudent and thoughtful about major decisions, never rushing into anything without careful consideration. 2 weeks before the wedding, Sandra delivered her report, and its contents confirmed my worst fears. Heather Lewis had been born Heather Simmons in a small town outside Phoenix. She had legally changed her last name after her first divorce at age 24 from Gregory Lewis, a real estate developer, 30 years her senior. She has a pattern, Sandra explained, as we sat in a quiet corner of a cafe far from my neighborhood. 3 serious relationships, all with wealthy older men in real estate. 2 marriages, both ending in significant settlements. Sandra slid photos across the table, Heather with a silver-haired man at a gala, Heather on a yacht with an older gentleman, Heather receiving keys to a Mercedes convertible. This was her most recent relationship before your son. Douglas Warner, 61, divorced her after finding she had been systematically transferring assets to accounts he did not know about. Most disturbing were the legal documents Sandra had uncovered. Heather had been sued twice by former partners for fraud and misrepresentation. Both cases had been settled out of court with sealed agreements. There's more, Sandra continued grimly. Her real estate license was suspended in Arizona 3 years ago for ethical violations. She moved to California and obtained a new license under Lewis. She presents herself as a consultant now, but her actual client list is virtually non-existent. I felt physically ill. She's targeted my son because of our family's wealth. Sandra nodded sympathetically. Based on my investigation, that seems likely. And given the speed of this relationship, she appears to be escalating her pattern. The next day, I visited Laura Hoffman, the attorney who had handled Arthur's estate. I brought Sandra's report and explained the situation. What can I do to protect the estate without alienating Travis? I asked. Laura reviewed the materials thoughtfully. Arthur was wise to put the mansion in your name, only, she noted. But there are other vulnerabilities we should address. For the next 2 hours, we reviewed the family trust property deeds and company ownership structures, making adjustments where possible. Without a prenuptial agreement, Travis's assets could be at risk in a divorce, Laura warned. Has he considered one? I suggested it, I admitted. He said it was unromantic, and that Heather was hurt by the implication she was after his money. Laura's expression was grave. That's often the response when someone actually is after the money. The final week before the wedding was an emotional roller coaster. I made one last attempt to talk to Travis, inviting him for breakfast at his favorite cafe. I'm concerned about how quickly all this is happening, I began carefully. Marriage is a huge step, and you and Heather haven't known each other very long. Travis stirred his coffee irritably. Mom, I'm marrying Heather next week. Why can't you just be happy for me? Because I love you, I said simply. And I worry this isn't what it seems. His face hardened. What are you implying? I chose my next words with extreme care. Has Heather shown interest in your financial situation, in the company, in my house? Travis slammed his cup down, splashing coffee onto the table. So that's what this is about, your money, your house. Dad would be ashamed of how selfish you've become. The unfairness of his accusation stung like a slap. Travis, that's not... Heather warned me, you might try to sabotage us, because you're afraid of being alone, of being replaced. He stood up, throwing money on the table. Well, I'm not going to let you ruin this for me. If you can't support my marriage, maybe you shouldn't come to the wedding at all. He stormed out, leaving me fighting back tears in a public cafe. That afternoon, Heather called, her voice syrupy with false concern. Travis told me about your conversation, she said. I want you to know I understand your fears. It's hard watching your child build a life with someone new, but I promise he'll take good care of him. The condescension in her tone made my skin crawl. This woman, younger than me by nearly 4 decades, was speaking to me like I was a confused child, rather than a woman who had built a business empire alongside her husband. The wedding proceeded as planned, a lavish spectacle that cost nearly $200,000 of my money. I smiled through it all, played my role as mother of the groom, and kept my concerns locked away. During the ceremony, watching Travis beam at his bride, I prayed I was wrong about Heather. Perhaps she truly did love him. Perhaps my protective instincts had led me astray. But as Heather caught my eye during the reception and gave me a smile that never reached her cold, calculating eyes, I knew in my heart that the real battle was just beginning. Whatever she had planned, I would need to be ready. The Tuesday after Travis and Heather returned from their honeymoon in Bora Bora, my doorbell rang unexpectedly at 10 in the morning. I opened it to find the newlyweds standing there, Travis looking uncomfortable, and Heather beaming with an unnerving confidence. Behind them stood a balding man in a suit, clutching a leather portfolio. "Mother, surprise visit," Travis said, his voice oddly strained. The formal mother, rather than his usual mom, immediately set off alarm bells. "Travis, Heather, come in," I replied, keeping my tone light. "And who is your friend?" "This is Mr. Daniels," Heather answered before Travis could speak. "He's a notary. We have some exciting news to share." I led them to the living room, noting how Heather's eyes darted around the space, as if already measuring for new furniture. Once seated, she took charge of the conversation while Travis stared at his hands. "Jessica," she began, dropping all pretense of warmth, "as you know, Travis and I have been discussing our future. We've decided we want to start fresh in a place that's truly ours." I glanced at Travis, whose face had taken on an ashen quality. "That sounds wonderful. Have you found a property you like?" Heather's smile tightened. "Actually, we have a buyer for this house. The paperwork is ready to sign today." The room seemed to tilt slightly. "This house. My house." "Travis's house too," Heather corrected smoothly. "Or did you forget that Arthur left it to both of you?" This was a blatant lie. Arthur had explicitly put the mansion in my name alone. I looked at Travis, expecting him to correct her, but he remained silent. "We've accepted an offer of $11.5 million, Heather continued, gesturing to the notary to open his portfolio. "It's above market value, so we'll all benefit nicely. After the split and taxes, you'll have plenty to buy a lovely condo." "A condo," I repeated momentarily, too stunned to say more. "Something easier for you to manage at your age," Heather said, with false concern. "This place is really too big for one person. We're doing you a favor, really." The notary, looking increasingly uncomfortable, placed papers on the coffee table. Heather slid them toward me along with a pen. "We need you to sign these today," she stated. "The buyers are eager to close quickly. We've arranged movers to help you pack up this weekend." This weekend I finally found my voice. "You expect me to leave my home of 20 years in 5 days? Heather's facade cracked, slightly irritation flashing across her features. "We've been more than generous, Jessica. Most people get 30 days to vacate, but we've arranged temporary housing for you at Sunset Gardens, the assisted living facility." My shock was giving way to anger. "Senior living community," Heather corrected with a condescending smile. "They have an opening now, but it might not be available if we wait." I turned to Travis, who still hadn't met my eyes. "Travis, do you have something to say about all this?" He finally looked up, and the conflict on his face was evident. "Mom, we've talked about this. The house is too big for you alone. It makes financial sense to sell now while the market is strong." "We've never discussed selling my home," I said firmly. "Our home," Heather interjected. "As Arthur's son and heir, Travis has equal claim to all assets, including this property." The sheer audacity of her lie momentarily left me speechless. She was counting on my shock and Travis's apparent belief in her version of events to bully me into compliance. "This is moving very fast," I said, stalling for time. "I'd like my attorney to review these documents before I sign anything." Heather's smile vanished completely. "That won't be necessary. Everything is in order. Nevertheless, I won't be signing today." Heather leaned forward, dropping all pretense of politeness. "Let me be clear, Jessica. You will sign these papers today, or will pursue legal action to force the sale. Travis has equal right to this property, and as his wife, I have a say in what happens to our assets." Mom, Travis finally spoke up, though his voice lacked conviction. "Please don't make this difficult. Heather has found us a beautiful property in Newport Beach. The proceeds from this sale will benefit all of us." I studied my son's face, seeing not the confident businessman Arthur had hoped to raise, but the same easily influenced boy who had always followed the strongest personality in the room. Now that personality was Heather, and she had thoroughly convinced him of her version of reality. "I need a moment," I said, rising from my seat. "Excuse me." "Don't take too long," Heather called after me, her tone making it clear she thought victory was inevitable. "Mr. Daniels has other appointments today." I walked calmly to Arthur's study and closed the door behind me. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. For the first time since this ordeal began, I felt a strange sense of clarity. This moment, this naked, undisguised attempt to steal my home, confirmed every suspicion I'd had about Heather from the beginning. I went to the wall, safe hidden behind Arthur's photograph, entered the combination, and removed a sealed envelope Laura had prepared for precisely this scenario. Then I called her office. "It's happening," I said simply when she answered. "They're here with a notary trying to force me to sell the house." "I'm on my way," Laura replied without hesitation. "Don't sign anything. Don't make any promises or agreements. I'll be there in 20 minutes. When I returned to the living room, Heather was on her phone already discussing furniture arrangements with someone. She hung up when she saw me. "Well," she demanded, "are you ready to sign?" "Not quite yet," I replied, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "My attorney is on her way. She should be here shortly." Heather's face flushed with anger. "This is ridiculous and unnecessary. You're just delaying the inevitable." "Perhaps," I said, sitting down calmly, "but I've always believed in doing things properly with professional guidance. Arthur taught me that." The next 20 minutes were excruciating. Heather alternated between thinly veiled threats and attempts to rush me, while Travis sat in uncomfortable silence. The notary, Mr. Daniels, kept checking his watch and looking longingly at the door. When the doorbell rang, Heather's expression darkened. I went to answer it myself, relief washing over me at the sight of Laura's familiar face. "Thank you for coming so quickly," I said, leading her into the living room. Laura assessed the situation with the sharp eyes that had made her one of Los Angeles's most formidable attorneys. "I understand there's some confusion about property ownership," she said, placing her briefcase on the table. "There's no confusion," Heather snapped. "Travis has equal right to this property as Arthur's son, and we've decided to sell it." Laura raised an eyebrow. "Is that so? Then you won't mind if I review the documents you're asking Mrs. Reynolds to sign." Without waiting for permission, she picked up the papers and began reading. After a few moments, she looked up, her expression stern. "These documents presuppose that Travis Reynolds has ownership interest in this property. That is factually and legally incorrect." Heather's confidence wavered visibly. "That's absurd. Of course he does. Arthur would never have left his only son off the deed to the family home." "Actually," Laura replied, opening her briefcase and removing a folder, "that's exactly what Arthur did with Travis's full knowledge and consent." The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. Heather's confident smirk faltered as Laura opened the folder and spread several documents on the coffee table. "This is the deed to the property at 1742 Ocean View Drive, recorded 5 years ago following Arthur Reynolds' passing," Laura explained professionally. "As you can see, it lists Jessica Reynolds as the sole owner. There is no co-ownership with Travis or anyone else." Heather snatched the document, her eyes scanning frantically. "This can't be right. Travis told me he co-owned the house with his mother." All eyes turned to Travis, who looked genuinely confused. "Dad always said the house would be part of my inheritance," he said defensively. I finally understood. Travis hadn't been lying to me. He'd been misinformed or had misunderstood. Perhaps in his grief after Arthur's death, he had heard what he wanted to hear. "Travis," I said gently, "your father and I discussed this extensively before he passed. The company shares were divided between us, with you receiving a significant portion and eventually full control. But the house remained solely in my name. It was never part of the inheritance plan." "That's convenient." Heather spat, her mask of civility completely gone. "You probably changed the deed after Arthur died to keep control." Laura's expression hardened. "That would be fraud, Mrs. Reynolds, and a serious accusation to make without evidence." She pulled out another document. "This is the original deed from when the property was purchased 15 years ago. It has always been in Jessica's name alone by Arthur's explicit choice. Heather turned to the notary. Is this legal? Can she just exclude her son like this? Mr. Daniels, clearly wishing to be anywhere else, cleared his throat. If the deed is solely in her name, then legally, the property is hers to do with as she wishes. But that's not fair. Heather's voice rose sharply. Travis is Arthur's son. He deserves his share. Fair, I repeated, finding my voice strengthening with each moment. Was it fair to come into my home with a notary and false documents demanding I leave within days? Was it fair to lie about my husband's wishes? Travis looked stricken. Mom, I really thought. Dad always talked about the house being part of the family legacy. And it is, I assured him. But Arthur was very specific about how he wanted that legacy structured. I turned to Laura. Show them the trust documents. Laura produced another set of papers. Arthur and Jessica established an irrevocable family trust 5 years ago, just before Arthur's passing. The mansion is designated to remain Jessica's primary residence for her lifetime. Upon her death, it transfers to the trust, which names Travis as beneficiary with specific conditions. What conditions? Travis asked. The property cannot be sold for 10 years after transfer to prevent hasty liquidation, Laura explained. And if the beneficiary attempts to force a sale during Jessica's lifetime, their interest is forfeit and redirected to a list of charitable organizations Arthur supported. The blood drained from Travis's face as understanding dawned. If Heather's scheme had proceeded, he would have potentially lost his entire inheritance. This is all very touching, Heather said sarcastically, but Travis is still entitled to half of all marital assets under California law. This house was purchased during your marriage to Arthur. Laura smiled thinly. Normally you would be correct. However, this property was purchased using Jessica's inheritance from her parents, which makes it separate property under California law, not community property. Arthur specifically acknowledged this in the deed and trust documents. The notary, Mr. Daniels, began quietly packing his portfolio. I believe there's been a misunderstanding about ownership. These sales documents presuppose an ownership interest that doesn't exist. I can't notarize them under these circumstances. Heather rounded on him furiously. Don't you dare leave. We had an agreement. My professional ethics prevent me from facilitating a transaction based on incorrect ownership claims, he replied, standing up. I suggest everyone consult their attorneys before proceeding further. With a nod to me, he made his way to the door. Heather looked like she might physically stop him but thought better of it. Once he was gone, she turned her fury on Travis. You told me you co-owned this house. You promised me. Travis looked shell-shocked. I thought I did, Dad always said. Your father said the house would remain in the family, I corrected gently, and it will through the trust. But he was very clear that I would have lifetime rights to live here. Heather's eyes narrowed as she assessed the situation. Her entire plan had collapsed, but she wasn't ready to concede defeat. This changes nothing, she declared. Travis is still wealthy from the company shares. We'll buy our own mansion. Laura cleared her throat. Actually, there's more you should know about Travis's inheritance. She produced yet another document. The company shares Travis received are held in a separate trust with specific provisions. He receives the income they generate, but cannot sell or transfer them without board approval for 20 years. This was designed to ensure the company remained intact, and Travis didn't face pressure to liquidate his inheritance. You're lying, Heather whispered, though her voice lacked conviction. Every document here is legally recorded and binding, Laura replied calmly. I suggested these protections to Arthur and Jessica precisely to prevent situations like this. Travis looked devastated not by the restrictions on his inheritance, but by the realization of what was happening. Heather, you told me you wanted to start fresh in our own place. You never mentioned forcing my mother out of her home. Heather's composure finally shattered completely. Of course I did. What did you think we were doing here today? Playing house. Her voice rose hysterically. This was the whole point. This house is worth a fortune, and you said it would be ours. The raw greed in her voice seemed to physically strike Travis. He recoiled, staring at his new wife, as if seeing her for the first time. I meant eventually, maybe years from now when Mom was ready to downsize, he said quietly, not throwing her out with 5 days' notice. Your mother is almost 70, Heather shouted. How many more years did you expect me to wait? I didn't marry you to live in some condo while she rattles around in this mansion. The words hung in the air, their implication unmistakable. Travis flinched as if she had slapped him. So it really was about the money, he said, his voice hollow. About this house. Heather realized her mistake too late. She attempted to backpedal, reaching for Travis's hand. No, baby, that's not what I meant. I'm just upset and saying things I don't mean. Travis pulled his hand away. Stop lying, Heather. For once, just stop. I felt a profound sadness watching my son's heart break in real time, but also a sense of relief that the truth was finally emerging. I had one more card to play. Travis. I said quietly, there's something else you should see. I handed him the envelope I'd retrieved from the safe. This is the report from a private investigator I hired before your wedding. Travis stared at the envelope, then at me. You investigated my wife. I investigated a woman who showed every sign of being interested in our family's wealth rather than my son. I corrected gently. I prayed I was wrong, Travis. I wanted to be wrong. Heather lunged for the envelope. This is an invasion of privacy. You had no right. Travis held it away from her, his expression hardening. What are you afraid of, Heather? He opened the envelope and began reading. With each page, his face grew more pained. When he finished, he looked up at Heather with devastation in his eyes. 3 wealthy men before me, 2 previous marriages to real estate developers, a suspended license for ethical violations. His voice broke. Was any of it real, Heather? Any of it at all? Heather's face contorted with rage as she realized her carefully constructed facade had completely collapsed. You stupid, pathetic mama's boy, she spat at Travis. Of course it wasn't real. Do you think I would have looked twice at you if it weren't for your family's money? You're nothing but a trust fund baby living off daddy's success. Travis physically recoiled, as if her words were physical blows. I fought the maternal instinct to shield him from her venom, knowing he needed to hear the unvarnished truth. I put up with your boring stories and your desperate need for approval, Heather continued mercilessly. I laughed at your pathetic jokes and pretended to be interested in your mundane life. Do you know how hard it was to act like I cared? That's enough, I said, firmly standing up. You've made your point, Heather. She whirled on me, her perfect makeup now streaked with angry tears. And you smug, interfering old woman. You think you've won. This isn't over. Laura stepped forward. Actually, Mrs. Reynolds, I strongly advise you to consider your next words and actions very carefully. You've already admitted to entering this marriage under false pretenses with the intent to acquire property through deception. So what? Heather snapped. We're married. California is a community property state. I'm still entitled to half of everything he has. Under normal circumstances, perhaps Laura conceded. However, given the evidence of fraud and your own admissions here today, Travis has grounds to file for annulment rather than divorce, which would significantly impact any financial settlement. The color drained from Heather's face. Annulment. Based on fraud, Laura confirmed, which, unlike divorce, can nullify the marriage as if it never existed and protect separate property from division in many cases. Travis, who had been silent during Heather's tirade, finally spoke. His voice was quiet but resolute. How soon can we file? Heather's expression shifted from rage to calculation in an instant. She took a deep breath and attempted to compose herself, forcing a tremulous smile. Travis, baby, I didn't mean any of that. I'm just upset and saying crazy things. She reached for his hand. You know I love you. This is all a misunderstanding. Travis pulled his hand away, as if her touch burned him. Stop, just stop. I heard you. Everyone here heard you. People say things they don't mean. When they're angry, she pleaded, tears now flowing freely. Your mother has hated me from the beginning. She poisoned you against me. We can work through this. The only thing my mother did was try to protect me. Travis replied, his voice strengthening. I was too blind to see it. He turned to Laura. How do we proceed with an annulment? Laura opened her briefcase again. I took the liberty of preparing the initial paperwork given the circumstances. We can file as early as tomorrow morning. Heather's facade crumbled entirely. You can't do this to me. I gave up everything for this marriage. What exactly did you give up, Heather? I asked quietly. Your apartment lease was month to month. You had no active clients in your supposed consulting business. According to the investigator's report, you had already sold most of your furniture before the wedding. You calculated everything. Travis realized aloud. You never planned for our marriage to last, did you? This was always about getting control of assets as quickly as possible. Heather's eyes darted around the room like a cornered animal. Suddenly, she snatched her phone from her purse. Fine. You want to play hardball? Let's see how you like having your family's dirty laundry spread all over social media. I've kept records of everything. Every conversation, every business detail Travis shared. I wonder what your investors would think about some of the company's more questionable practices. Laura's expression hardened. That would be extortion, Mrs. Reynolds, on top of the fraud. Are you really willing to add criminal charges to this situation? For a moment, no one spoke. The only sound was Heather's rapid breathing as she clutched her phone, her threat hanging in the air. I trusted you, Travis said finally, his voice breaking. I defended you to everyone who questioned how quickly we got engaged. I gave you access to my life, my family, my home. He looked at her with a mixture of heartbreak and dawning anger. Was there ever a moment when you actually cared about me at all? Something flickered across Heather's face, perhaps a fleeting hint of remorse or shame, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. You were a means to an end, she said coldly, nothing more. The brutal honesty seemed to release something in Travis. He straightened his shoulders, and for the first time since Arthur's death, I saw a glimpse of my husband's strength in my son's face. Then we have nothing more to discuss, he said firmly. I want you out of our lives. Today? Heather laughed bitterly. Our condo is in both our names. Where exactly am I supposed to go? The Peninsula Hotel has excellent accommodations, I suggested. I'll cover a week's stay while you make arrangements. After that, you're on your own. How generous, Heather sneered, but I could see the calculations happening behind her eyes. A week at a luxury hotel would give her time to regroup and plan her next move. In exchange, Laura added smoothly, you'll sign a preliminary agreement not to disparage the Reynolds family or disclose any private information while the annulment proceeds. Violation would result in immediate legal action. Heather glared at each of us in turn before snatching the agreement Laura produced. She signed it with an angry flourish, then grabbed her purse. This isn't over, not by a long shot. Actually, it is, Travis said, with newfound resolution. I'll have your things packed and sent to the hotel. Don't come back to the condo. You'll regret this, Heather hissed as she stalked toward the door. All of you. After she slammed the door behind her, a heavy silence fell over the room. Travis sank onto the sofa, his head in his hands. I've been such a fool. I sat beside him and placed my hand on his shoulder. You wanted to believe in love, Travis. That's not foolish. It's human. I should have listened to you, he said, looking up with red-rimmed eyes. You tried to warn me and I accused you of being controlling. How can you even look at me after the things I said to you? Because I'm your mother, I said simply. And because I've made my share of mistakes too. Laura tactfully gathered her documents. I'll get these annulment papers filed first thing tomorrow. In the meantime, Travis, don't communicate with Heather except through me. And change your passwords, email, banking, everything. After Laura left Travis, and I sat in the living room, as afternoon faded into evening. Slowly, haltingly, he began to talk. About how Heather had systematically isolated him from friends who questioned their relationship. How she had convinced him I was trying to control his inheritance. How she had planted ideas about selling the mansion, framing it initially as concern for my welfare. She kept saying the house was too much for you to manage alone, he admitted, that we'd be doing you a favor. Somehow she turned it from someday to immediately after the wedding. I never agreed to force you out, Mom. I swear. I believe you, I assured him. Heather is very skilled at manipulation. She's had plenty of practice. Travis looked around the living room, taking in the space where he'd grown up. I can't believe I almost let her take this away from you. From us. But you didn't, I reminded him. When it came to the moment of truth, you stood up to her. He shook his head sadly. Only after you and Laura exposed her lies. I was completely blind until then. As evening deepened, I ordered dinner from Travis's favorite Italian restaurant. Over pasta and wine, our conversation gradually shifted from Heather to memories of Arthur, of Travis's childhood in this house, of the legacy Arthur had built and protected. Dad knew, didn't he? Travis asked suddenly. He set up those trusts because he knew I could be influenced. I chose my words carefully. Your father wanted to protect you while you grew into your strength. He always believed you would find your way. He'd be disappointed in how easily I was manipulated. No, I said firmly. He would be proud of how you handled yourself today when the truth came to light. Arthur always said character isn't about never making mistakes. It's about how you respond when you realize you've made one. As Travis prepared to leave for a hotel, he couldn't face returning to the condo he'd shared with Heather. He paused in the doorway. Can I stay in my old room tonight? I don't want to be alone. My heart swelled with love for my son, who suddenly seemed both the grown man he was and the vulnerable boy he'd once been. Of course, it's always your home too. That night, as I passed his room on the way to mine, I heard muffled sobs through the door. I hesitated, wondering if I should go to him, but decided to give him privacy to process his grief. Travis had taken the first steps toward reclaiming his independence today. Part of respecting that was allowing him the dignity of his private pain. In my own room, I sat at my vanity and looked at the photograph of Arthur I kept there. You were right to worry about him, I whispered to my husband's image. But you were also right to believe in him. He's going to be okay, Arthur. We both are. 6 months passed, bringing profound changes to our lives. The annulment was granted with surprising ease, largely due to Heather's absence at the proceedings. According to Laura, she had already moved to Seattle, presumably to seek her next target. Travis moved into the guest house on my property, needing both proximity to family and space to rebuild his independence. Those first weeks were difficult, as he processed the humiliation and betrayal. Some mornings I would find him sitting on the terrace at dawn, staring out at the ocean with red-rimmed eyes. Other days, anger would overtake him, and he would spend hours at the gym, returning exhausted but calmer. I keep replaying every moment with her, he confessed one evening as we shared dinner, trying to see the signs I missed. Hindsight always reveals what we couldn't see at the time, I replied. The important thing is learning to recognize those signs in the future. At my gentle suggestion, Travis began seeing Dr. Matthews, a therapist, specializing in recovery from manipulative relationships. Gradually, I watched my son reclaim himself, separating the person he truly was from the version Heather had tried to mold to serve her purposes. The legal aftermath of Heather's scheme played out over several months. She made a half-hearted attempt to claim part of Travis's assets despite the annulment, but Laura easily defeated her arguments in court. The prenuptial agreement Travis had refused to request might have simplified matters, but in the end, Heather's own words and actions condemned her case. The judge cited her admitted deception as grounds for denying any financial settlement, Laura reported after the final hearing. Her attorney practically ran from the courthouse. I suspect he finally realized what kind of client he was representing. During this period, I made my own decision about the future of our family legacy. Arthur had structured our estate with the best intentions, but recent events had revealed flaws in the plan. I invited Laura to the house to discuss revisions. I want to create a more balanced approach, I explained. The extreme protections in the current trust were necessary when Travis was still finding his way, but they also infantilize him in some respects. Laura nodded thoughtfully. What are you envisioning? A gradual transition of control, rather than an all-or-nothing approach. Travis has grown tremendously through this experience. He deserves the chance to exercise that growth. The new trust structure we developed maintained protection against predatory relationships while acknowledging Travis's maturity and right to meaningful participation in family decisions. When I presented it to him, his eyes filled with tears. You still trust me after everything that happened, he asked incredulously. I trust the man you've become because of what happened, I corrected him. Painful experiences can be our greatest teachers if we let them. As summer turned to fall, Travis began taking a more active role in the company again, his confidence gradually returning. He implemented new ideas Arthur would have approved of, finding his own leadership style rather than trying to imitate his father's. Our relationship evolved too. For the first time since Arthur's death, Travis and I established a true adult parent-child dynamic based on mutual respect rather than dependence or authority. We could disagree without it becoming a power struggle and collaborate without either of us feeling diminished. One significant change came in Travis's social life. Rather than jumping into another relationship, he reconnected with old friends. Heather had encouraged him to drop particularly Jordan, his college roommate, who had always been a steadying influence. Jordan asked me why I stopped calling after I met Heather. Travis told me after they had dinner together. He said he tried to reach out several times, but I always had excuses not to get together. Classic isolation technique, I noted. Manipulators typically separate their targets from anyone who might question their influence. Travis nodded ruefully. Jordan apparently never trusted Heather, said she reminded him of his sister's ex who cleaned out her bank accounts. Meanwhile, my friendship with Eleanor deepened through the ordeal. Her unwavering support and practical wisdom had been instrumental in navigating the crisis. "You know what amazes me most about this whole situation," she remarked during one of our regular lunches. "How you never said 'I told you so' to Travis, not even once." I smiled. What would that accomplish except to hurt him further? He's been harder on himself than I could ever be. Eleanor raised her glass in a toast. To wisdom that comes with age. God knows we've earned it. By the time the holidays approached, Travis felt ready to host a small gathering at the guest house, his first social event since the annulment. He invited a carefully chosen group, Jordan, and his wife, 2 colleagues from work, and a woman named Allison, whom he had met through a business conference. Allison's a pediatric surgeon, he told me, as we prepared appetizers together. Completely financially independent and passionate about her work, not remotely interested in real estate. I smiled at the clear message he was sending. He had learned to value substance over surface, independence over opportunism. The evening was a success, filled with genuine laughter and conversation. I watched Travis navigate his host duties with a new confidence, no longer seeking constant approval or validation from others. When he introduced me to Allison, I saw respect in her eyes rather than calculation, and felt a weight lift from my heart. Whether this particular relationship developed or not, Travis was making healthier choices. As his guests were leaving, Travis pulled me aside. "Thank you for everything, Mom, for seeing what I couldn't see, for being there when I fell apart, for believing I could put myself back together." I hugged him tightly. That's what family does. Real family, not the counterfeit version Heather tried to create. We protect each other, but we also give each other room to grow, even if that means risking mistakes. The following weekend, Travis helped me host a larger gathering at the main house, a tradition Arthur and I had maintained for years, but which had fallen by the wayside after his death. As our friends and family filled the rooms with conversation and laughter, the house felt truly alive again. Standing on the terrace that evening, watching the sunset over the Pacific, I felt Arthur's presence more strongly than I had in years. Not as a ghost or supernatural visitation, but as the living legacy of love and wisdom he had built into our family's foundation. "He would be proud of you both," Eleanor said, joining me with a glass of wine. "Weathering this storm together, emerging stronger." "Life never stops teaching us, does it?" I mused. At 68, I thought I had learned all my major lessons. Eleanor chuckled. "The universe always has a few more surprises in store, especially when we get comfortable." Inside, Travis was sharing a story with our guests, his animated gestures reminiscent of Arthur. Watching him, I realized the most important lesson from our ordeal: true wealth has nothing to do with mansions or bank accounts. It lives in the authentic connections we build, the wisdom we gain from challenges, and the courage to remain open-hearted despite life's disappointments. Heather had targeted our family for our material assets, never understanding that our real treasure lay in what couldn't be stolen or sold: our resilience, our capacity for forgiveness, and our willingness to grow through pain, rather than being diminished by it. As I rejoin the party now surrounded by genuine affection and hard-won wisdom, I feel profound gratitude for both the joy and the challenges that have shaped my life's journey. If my story offers any lesson, perhaps it's this: protect what matters, trust your instincts, and remember that even the most painful betrayals can ultimately lead to deeper understanding and more authentic connections. What experiences have taught you to trust your instincts about people? Have you ever had to protect yourself or a loved one from someone with hidden motives? Share your stories in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear it. Remember, wisdom often comes from our most painful experiences, but only if we're brave enough to learn the lessons they offer. Thank you for listening, and may you find both strength and compassion on your own journey.